They say legends are born from truth, twisted and polished until the real story disappears into shadow. But what if I told you the greatest lawman in American history, a man who arrested over 3,000 criminals, killed 14 outlaws in self-defense, and never once was wounded, was erased from the pages of history? His name was Bass Reeves. Born into the chains of slavery in 1838, he would rise to become the most feared and respected U.S. Marshal in the untamed West. Yet when Hollywood needed a hero, they painted him white, gave him a mask, and called him the Lone Ranger. Tonight we uncover the truth about the man whose legend was too powerful to be forgotten, yet too inconvenient to be remembered. This is the story of Bass Reeves, the real Lone Ranger that history tried to hide. Arkansas, 1838. Bass Reeves entered this world as property, born into slavery on a cotton plantation. His childhood was stolen by the crack of whips and the weight of chains. But Bass possessed something his captors could never break, an indomitable spirit and a mind sharper than any blade. When the Civil War erupted, Bass was forced to serve his master, a Confederate colonel named George Reeves. During a heated card game, some say it was poker, others say it was principle, Bass struck his master. That single act of defiance sealed his fate. He had two choices: face certain execution or flee into the unknown. Bass chose freedom. He escaped into Indian territory, into lands so wild and lawless that even the bravest men feared to tread. There, among the Creek and Seminole tribes, Bass Reeves would transform from fugitive slave into something far more dangerous, a legend in the making. For years, Bass lived among the native tribes, learning their languages, their ways of tracking, their survival skills. He became fluent in Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole, skills that would later make him invaluable. He learned to read the land like a book, to become invisible in plain sight, to track a man across stone and water. When the Civil War ended and slavery was abolished, Bass emerged from the wilderness as a free man. He married, started a family, and bought land in Arkansas. But farming wasn't his destiny. In 1875, the legendary hanging judge Isaac Parker was appointed to the federal court in Fort Smith, Arkansas, with jurisdiction over 74,000 square miles of Indian Territory, a region overrun with murderers, thieves, and desperados. Judge Parker needed deputies who knew the territory, who spoke the languages, who couldn't be intimidated. He needed men who were already legends. And when Bass pinned on that silver star, the outlaws of the West had no idea that their worst nightmare had just become the law. Bass Reeves didn't just enforce the law, he became its avenging angel. Standing 6'2" with an imposing frame, he cut a figure that commanded respect and instilled fear. But it wasn't his size that made him legendary, it was his brilliance. Bass was a master of disguise, often posing as a drifter, a cowboy, or even an outlaw to get close to his targets. In one legendary operation, he disguised himself as a homeless wanderer and walked straight into an outlaw camp, claiming he was on the run from the law. The criminals welcomed him with open arms, never suspecting that the law itself sat among them, counting their numbers, memorizing their faces. When Bass revealed his badge and drew his twin Colt .45 revolvers, the outlaws learned a terrifying truth. You can't outrun justice when justice has already found you. Over his 32-year career, Bass brought in criminals that other marshals wouldn't even pursue. He was relentless, riding through blizzards and floods, tracking men for weeks or months until they had nowhere left to run. The stories of Bass Reeves sound like fiction, but they're documented fact. Once he tracked 2 outlaws for 18 days through brutal terrain. When he finally cornered them, they refused to surrender. In the gunfight that followed, Bass killed both men and walked away without a scratch. Another time he arrested his own son, Benjamin, who was wanted for murdering his wife. Despite the heartbreak, Bass never hesitated. "The law is the law," he said, and he brought his own flesh and blood to justice. That act alone proved what kind of man Bass Reeves was: incorruptible, honorable, bound by a code that transcended even blood. But perhaps his most famous technique was his use of disguises and psychological warfare. Bass would sometimes arrive in a town days before making arrests, gathering intelligence while hidden in plain sight. By the time he revealed himself, he knew everything about his targets, where they slept, who they trusted, when they were vulnerable. The outlaws called him the Ghost because he seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. Always one step ahead, always watching. But being a black lawman in the post-Civil War West came with dangers beyond outlaws and gunfights. Bass operated in a time when racism was woven into the fabric of society, when a black man with a badge was an affront to those who believed in white supremacy. Yet Bass commanded respect through his actions and his unwavering professionalism. He arrested white criminals, black criminals, native criminals. Justice was blind in Bass Reeves' hands, even if society wasn't. There were towns where he wasn't welcome, saloons where he couldn't enter, people who spat at his feet despite the star on his chest. But Bass never faltered. He understood something profound. He wasn't just enforcing the law. He was proving that a formerly enslaved man could be the very embodiment of justice. Every arrest was a statement. Every criminal he brought in was proof that character and capability had nothing to do with the color of a man's skin. And slowly, grudgingly, even his harshest critics had to admit, Bass Reeves was the best lawman that territory had ever seen. The legend of Bass Reeves spread like wildfire across the frontier. Cowboys told stories around campfires about the marshal who never missed, who could track a ghost, who couldn't be killed. Dime novels began circulating in the 1880s featuring a mysterious lawman who rode with a Native American companion, who used silver bullets as his calling card, who never showed his face but always got his man. Sound familiar? The Lone Ranger, the masked hero of radio, television, and film, bore striking similarities to Bass Reeves. The silver bullets? Bass was known for his impeccable marksmanship. The Native American companion? Bass worked closely with a Seminole man named Grant Johnson and others throughout his career. The moral code, the impossible victories, the legendary status, all Bass Reeves. But when the Lone Ranger was created in 1933 for radio, he was white. Hollywood took the legend of a black marshal and whitewashed it, giving credit to a fictional character, while the real hero faded into obscurity. For decades, Bass Reeves was forgotten, his stories lost, his legacy buried beneath layers of racism and revisionist history. Bass Reeves retired from federal service in 1907. After Oklahoma achieved statehood, federal marshals lost jurisdiction in the territory. He was in his late 60s, but retirement didn't suit him. Within 2 years, he joined the Muskogee Police Department, becoming one of the first black police officers in the city. He worked until 1909, when illness finally forced him to stop. On January 12, 1910, Bass Reeves died of Bright's disease, a kidney ailment. He was 71 years old. His funeral was attended by hundreds, including many of the outlaws he'd arrested, who came to pay respects to the man who'd caught them fair and square. But despite his legendary career, Bass died without fanfare in the national press. No monuments were erected, no films were made. History moved on, and Bass Reeves was left behind, a footnote in dusty archives, known only to scholars and those who remembered the old stories. For nearly a century, America forgot the man who'd proven that heroes come in all colors, that justice can triumph over prejudice, that one man with courage and principle can change the world. But truth, like justice, has a way of refusing to stay buried. In recent decades, historians have unearthed Bass Reeves' story, piecing together his incredible legacy from court records, newspaper accounts, and oral histories. Books have been written, documentaries produced, and slowly, painfully slowly, America is remembering the real Lone Ranger. In 2013, Bass Reeves was inducted into the Texas Trail of Fame. In 2021, a bridge in Oklahoma was named in his honor. Statues now stand in Fort Smith and Muskogee, bronze monuments to a man who deserved recognition a century ago. Hollywood has finally taken notice, with new films and series in development about Bass Reeves' life, starring actors who look like him, telling his true story without sanitization or whitewashing. The question haunts us: how many other heroes have been erased from history? How many legends were rewritten, their skin lightened, their stories stolen? Bass Reeves' rediscovery forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about whose stories we tell and whose we conveniently forget. Bass Reeves arrested over 3,000 criminals. He was involved in 14 shootouts and killed 14 men, all in self-defense, all ruled justified. In 32 years as a lawman, he was never wounded, never bested, never corrupted. From slave to legend, from invisible to immortal, Bass Reeves embodied the American ideal of justice far better than the fictional hero who borrowed his legend. His story reminds us that history isn't just written by victors, it's written by those who control the narrative. For too long, that narrative excluded men like Bass Reeves, whose heroism didn't fit convenient myths about who could be a hero in the Old West. But the truth survives. It survives in the court records of Fort Smith, in the whispered stories of the families he saved, in the legacy of Lawman, who followed in his footsteps. Bass Reeves proved that justice knows no color, that courage recognizes no chains, that a man defined by his character can achieve the impossible. The real Lone Ranger wasn't a masked white man on a white horse. He was a black marshal on a gray horse, riding into history with nothing but his wits, his weapons, and an unbreakable commitment to the law. His name was Bass Reeves, and now, finally, we remember.